Okay, so game 4 here has no draw whatsoever on the board. Lost Arts looks utterly useless. Arms is pretty slick, especially with all the virtual coin on the board from Forager and Market. You have Trashing and Doctor, which my opponent opened with. Do not like it because of all the shelters around. He might do well, maybe. But on 3-4, I'm definitely not opening with a Doctor. In fact, I like the Marauder. Another reason why I don't like the Doctor, because with all the ruins in your deck, it's very difficult to use Doctor to get those things out. So my opponent goes Marauder, Doctor, turns 1 and 2. I go for a Marauder, of course, and I want to get the trashing going as quickly as possible because that is going to be a bit of an issue on this board. We have Forager, which trashes, and we have a lot of ruins coming in from the Marauder. So I'm going to open with the Forager and the Marauder here. Did consider the Doctor, but again, I didn't like it. Especially seeing as how I could hit the Marauder with my Doctor Overpay and just cry tears. So Minstrel for my opponent, reasonable to get around to the Marauder as quickly as possible. I pick up a second Marauder, try to gum up the Minstrel a little bit. Hopefully it'll reveal some ruins and make it so that it takes a bit longer for my opponent to find his Doctor and his second Marauder, which he also has. So finally my opponent gains a Forager. I have two of them, and I'm going to stick with two of them for quite some time here. Perhaps I should have picked up a third one. Hard to say. Maybe it's not so hard to say, honestly. Maybe a third one is definitely what you need to pick up at this point. Because I usually say, okay, if you get junked, you want cards that could trash like three things out of your deck per shuffle. So that would be, in this case, three Foragers. I especially now don't like the Doctor because of the amount of things in my deck, so it has to be Forager at this point for me for trashing. Instead of picking up the third Forager, I do go for a scheme instead here. The hope with the scheme is that I can play one of my two Foragers more often to avoid having to pick up a third Forager. Again, perhaps just picking up the third Forager is the best thing. In this case, the two Foragers here would have been fine. I could have foraged Copper Rune Library and played the Abandoned Mine actually and picked up a Scheme or another Forager and bought arms. So we are doing very similar things at this point. My opponent has a couple more markets than I do and a throne room at this point. His Doctor has trashed one or two coppers out of his deck, which is okay. Not the best work that Doctor can do, of course, but it is okay. About as good as a Forager, and as long as it stays that way, I'm quite happy to see that. So a market for me here, and I'm gonna start piling on the throne rooms at this point in the game. I think it's quite important to go after the throne rooms quite heavily. Throne on market is perhaps the best thing, I believe, on this board, although Throne on Wandering Minstrel is a decent option as well. So we're at a point now where there are two ruins left in the pile, and the Minstrel seems like it'll run. The markets also seems like it'll run. We just have to get as many of these things as we can before the piles run out. So here I am gonna see both my Marauders, so pretty happy that I can stick my opponent with the last two ruins here. And 4 is gonna be Throne Room followed by another Throne Room. Perhaps I should have picked up another Minstrel. In some variations, if you have a lot of actions, you can just play the ruins out, abandoned mines, ruined libraries, etc. But I decided to go after the throne rooms a bit more heavily here, really hoping for Throne Forager early on and then later on going for Throne on Market. Now you have to be very careful here because like I said, there's no draw, so all these cards that don't draw like Marauder, Forager, Spoils, Ruins, all these things are going to get in your way. So you have to be very thin to have a deck that works well. Very thin to have a deck that works well. So Scheme is doing relatively okay for me here. this point, I'm gonna just play the minstrel and throw in the market. The buys are actually a bit important here because of arms on the board. So you would like to have a spare buy around just to pick up on arms. At this point, the decks are starting to produce some virtual coins. So here my opponent comes up at 9, which is pretty good. So he can pick up, for example, market throne room and then buy arms to pick up another throne room. He goes for a scheme instead, of course, here. So that's a pretty productive turn for my opponent. And actually, what I thought the market pile would go down, but the throne room pile is actually looking very, very thin. I do plan to pick up as many throne rooms as possible here. So I do play that Ruin Library. Again, I could have trashed it with the Forager, but I decided to try to go a little bit further into my deck. Just trying to cycle as quickly as possible. I can get to the Ruin Library later. So here, market of the coin in play, and I buy arms to gain a throne room. So a nice thing that you can do too is throne on scheme. Maybe keep setting throne and scheme back on top of your deck. I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to see my foragers as quickly as possible, or to use my throne rooms on my markets. Didn't really want to do that throne scheme trick there. I didn't really see much point in doing that. Anyways, just arms for my opponent. He doesn't have a lot of money and he picks up the last throne room. So now 2 piles are out and markets are thin. So at this point, I'm actually looking to pick up some provinces here. I know you do need, what, $20 to empty the pile, so it is not entirely unreasonable to pick up just one more market at this point. But if I do get to 8, I am going to pick up a province instead of the market, of course. Sorry about that. Now here I do decide to trash our spoils with my Forager. I'm not sure if that was the best time to do that. My opponent also has Foragers. It does make those a bit stronger. And in the hope that I make better use of the improved Foragers, I pick up a 3rd Forager here. I'm still not thin enough to where I would like to be. I just played 3 Ruin Libraries out of my deck, which is nice and all that I was able to play them, but I would rather not have them there. Excellent food for Forager, I feel. Anyways, so I was able to pick up a province there, and I was also able to buy arms, which is nice. So here my opponent is actually going to come up with a similar turn. He goes for a province and arms, but I think here he also goes for an estate. Now, I don't think this estate is too good. I don't really see what it does for him at this point in the game. It isn't so close to the end of the game that he needs to buy the estate, I felt. But he did so I wasn't unhappy to see him pick up the estate there. And in fact, the estates rather are also a pile that needs to be considered in terms of ending the game. So I only noticed that a little bit later on in the game. I don't know if I missed something at this point in the game with an estate pile out, but right now you need 7 buys, $12 to be able to pile out the estate. Something which my opponent might actually be capable of. He came up with a 9 on a turn, and I think enough buys to do that. So maybe he might be able to get to 12 with a couple spoils or something. Who knows? As it is, I don't have that much money, just enough to pick up a province though, and with my arms I do pick up another scheme. I would like to start putting my throne and minstrels on top of my deck to avoid this rubbish from happening. This is an absolute garbage hand, honestly. I don't know. I have I have no words for this. This turn does set me back a bit. I fully expected my opponent to pick up a province on this turn. Instead, he doesn't get enough money to pick up a province, but he does pick up a market and a scheme with the $7 that he has. So now the market pile is a little bit thinner. Just need $15 to be able to empty that pile. Here I decide that I don't want these spoils in my deck, so I get rid of it just to try to draw a bit more cards. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have kept the spoils in my deck and gained the scheme from arms instead. but I decided that I didn't want the spoils in, so we get rid of it. Here I trash a ruined library. Again, it just clutters up the minstrel, so I think trashing the library over the copper is the better thing to do there. Duchy for my opponent on his last turn. And with 4 here, could be a couple estates, could be arms for an estate, or arms for something and buy an estate. And I decide now that I do want the estate. The game is pretty close to ending. My opponent needs to get a duchy to take the points lead and $9 to pick up 3 schemes and enough buys to arms gain the next one. So I didn't feel comfortable with that position, so I decided to pick up the estate just so that a duchy doesn't give my opponent the points lead if he's able to get up to, what was that, 9 or 5, $14. Maybe I'm overestimating his deck at that point. Maybe I am, but I decided to play it a little bit conservative, perhaps too much so. Anyways, province number 2 for my opponent here. He's able to get up to 8. Able to get up to 8 here. And unfortunately, I'm not able to do so. I just wanted one more coin to be able to get up to 8 here, but I wasn't able to get there. I was able to get 7 though, so I'm going to pick up the duchy because my opponent picked up a scheme on his last turn, so he might actually be pressing for the end of the game at this point. So I really need to make sure that I keep up in points. Schemes can empty so quickly here. You just need $6, 3 buys, and the schemes are gone. The schemes are gone. So I can't give my opponent such an easy pile out. And this part of the end game here was very, very tense and drawn out because I had to keep watching the piles all the time here, trying to keep ahead of the point situation. My opponent comes up with 8, I believe, here. Goes for the province to get the points lead, right? Emptying the schemes doesn't help him there. But perhaps he could have gone for something like scheme, estate, arms, and won on that turn. So I think he missed a win there, which is real scary, right? Real scary. He was able to pick up a province though, which means that, well, I can't easily end the game in the same way that he had the opportunity to, and that is going to be happening for the next 2 turns or so. My opponent has all the freedom, all the flexibility, all the control in this endgame here. I'm not sure how he was able to concoct such a scenario where he was in control, but for most of the turns in this endgame here, I felt one step behind. Maybe that's first player, I'm not sure, but that is the situation as is. Now here I decide, well look, I don't need the estate, it isn't really helping me too much. I decide to get rid of it so I could throw in this Forager to pick up enough money for a province. As it is, I need the estate because I was being careful to not give my opponents the points lead. For the last couple turns, I slipped up here. I gave him the points lead, and again, once again, he needs just to pick up the 3 schemes. 6 and 3 buys will do it for him. Fortunately, he doesn't find that much money, or he's holding back spoils in his hand and missed it, I don't know. But he goes for a duchy only here, and if he doesn't pick up an estate, I might have a pilot on the estates. I just need 8 and 5 buys, and I will overtake him on points, but he smartly picks up an estate and cuts me off from that alternative. Now, excuse me, what I need to do here is perhaps to pick up a duchy and the remaining estates to try to win. And I was looking very carefully through after each card that I played here, but I would need $11 and 6 buys or so to do that. 5 for the duchy, 6 for the estates, and 1 buy for the arms, but I couldn't do it. I could not find $11. I could find $10, I believe. Excuse me, but not 11 to pick up the win. Had you drawn me a copper minstrel instead of this throne room, we might have been okay. Or spoils even, or spoils, or a market, or something. Any kind of money, but just 10, not 11 to close out the game. Not happy with that at all, of course. Double duchy is, I feel, the best thing that I could do here. The estate really just makes it a lot easier for my opponent to pile out. And in fact, it doesn't really matter. Silver here, hopefully I could have more money to buy things later on or trash it to the Forager to make them stronger. Not going to get a chance to do that at all because my opponent piles out the estates for the win. So this endgame, I don't know how it ended up this way, but he was in control all the time for the endgame here. At no point I was in a position to press for the end of the game, I felt like. And my opponent eventually ends up taking this game. So that is game 4 for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you.